Hello and welcome to Washington Watch. Joining us to talk about the many issues surrounding the case of Trayvon Martin is Donald Tibbs, a law professor at the Earle Mack School of Law at Drexel University. Jennifer Butler, Executive Director of Faith in Public Life, a strategy center for people of faith. And Bishop Aubrey Shines, Senior Pastor of Glory Ministries in Tampa, Florida. Folks, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thank you for having me.
This is certainly a stunning story. It has captured the attention of so many people across this country. And it was interesting, on Friday I tweeted to folks to say, hey, let me know if about the various marches and things like that that's happening in your cities. I literally had to send out about 40 different events. What is it about this case that you think has truly galvanized people in such an amazing way?
People have an expectation that the law will work the way that it is supposed to work. And what's difficult to see here is that someone has lost their life, that it's extremely tragic, and the state of Florida particularly has not done anything to move in and use its laws the way that it actually can.
What also I think stands out is when you begin to look at what we do know about this case, when you have George Zimmerman who says, yes, I indeed shot him. The police take him down to the police station. But then after interviewing him, they let him go. They don't take the clothes in terms of for evidence. He gets the gun back. Trayvon Martin's body is in the morgue for 3 days. They don't drug test Zimmerman. And so I think on one level you have really shoddy police work that could potentially impact whether or not he gets indicted, and if he does, whether that's going to be a murder charge or a manslaughter charge based upon what is clear that clearly has been a shoddy investigation.
Well, that's particularly why we don't have the evidence, right? I mean, the police have failed to do their job and conduct the investigation in a meaningful and responsible way. And if the police fail at the front end to do what they need to do in order to move forward with the case, it's difficult to have the evidence later on, and that's what creates some of the confusion as well as some of the apprehension about moving forward.
And plus, Sanford, Florida, that police department, they have had past issues with race, with suspects who have been shot and killed.
Correct. And not only that, I think we have to look at the whole gamut here. Again, let's just not stop there. I would like to know, for instance, with Zimmerman, were there other calls that were made with other cases? I've been told 20 to 30 other cases have in the past where he's called 911 and they said, hey, look, back down. Well, if that's the case, why is this guy still in the position that he's in? He seems to be a loose cannon. Again, let's look at the evidence.
Self-appointed neighborhood watch.
Well, see, and again, that's a little scary.
I do want to go to this issue. Let's deal with the law in Florida because we've had lots of conversation regarding this stand your ground law. Florida passed it. And there are 23 other states that have also passed stand your ground laws. The National Rifle Association, they want this in all 50 states. And what it says is, look, I'm born and raised in Texas. And so I've always known if somebody comes on your property and trying to steal your car or harm you, you have the right to use deadly force to protect yourself on your property. This law expands that, but to say anywhere. And the problem is when you say, I thought someone was trying to harm me, so therefore I protected myself. It seems to me there's lots of problems with this law. And so what does it mean if so many other states want to take up this law?
Well, I've heard, though, Roland, several of the reps that really introduced this law, and they've been on the air several times in the last few weeks here regarding this. That law is really not that broad. What and how these kinds of things have really come about is, for instance, you're in a car and someone comes up to take you out of your car, what they call carjacking. A lot of these things were developed to simply say, hey, look, you have a right to protect you, your wife, your children. Now, I'm from Chicago, and here are states that don't have any protection as far as citizens being able to carry legal firearms. And look at the epidemic that we're having in that city right now as a result. So I'm not sure we need to throw out the law, examine the law, but from what I'm hearing and from what I understand, I don't think that the law is the issue. I think the individual is the issue, not the law.
So can I disagree with that
Go
vehemently?
ahead.
Actually, the law is particularly the problem here. The way that the statute is written is that it gives a person, it extends what we call the castle doctrine. And what you were just speaking about was the right to have self-protection in your own home. And you actually don't have the right to use deadly force unless deadly force is first coming towards you. But you also have to have a reasonable fear of imminent death or bodily injury. And so the extension of the castle doctrine out into the general public is what makes this a particular problem. And the way that the law is written is that it is overbroad. It doesn't have any limitations on it at all, and it allows individuals to act, as you said, based upon what they think. And then at the same time, after that, use the doctrine itself to protect themselves.
Yeah, it seems to me that these laws are, shoot first and ask questions later. And I think they need to be challenged. I think not only legally, but culturally, it sends a message that vigilantism is okay and that we have the right to use deadly force in almost any scenario.
I don't think so. I think, in all due respect to the professor as well, that I think it's a bit naive to assume that the issue is one of intent is an incorrect issue. If someone is coming on to you and that purpose is to harm you, say, well, we don't know what to think. What are we going to do? Wait until they do whatever they want to do, and then all of a sudden, boy, gee, we should have really reacted then?
Bishop, we have seen in Florida a dramatic increase in the number of justifiable homicides, and police departments and prosecutors were not in favor of this law. And so it's very interesting when the very people who we should be trusting to law enforcement, cops, prosecutors.
Roland, I've not seen that, Roland. The law officers that I know and law officers that are part of our congregation, I speak with these individuals.
When this law was up for debate in the Florida legislature, prosecutors and police officers were saying this is going to be a problem for us because I think in this case we see what happened. Because you say the law's not that broad, but the Sanford Police Department saw it as broad. And so the problem there is when prosecutors are saying our hands are sort of tied because people could just simply claim now self-defense. It's an issue for them.
But Roland, it was an overwhelming support of even the police department when this law was finally enacted.
With all due respect, back to the bishop, I might not know a lot of things, but I'm not naive about the law. The way that we have to understand how the law works is that it's not just that someone comes towards you. They have to actually put you in reasonable fear and apprehension, and you have to be able to identify that reasonable fear and apprehension. And if you can do that, then you can, then and only then, even if you read the statute itself, it says that specifically in the language, you can stand your ground, but only after you have a reasonable fear.
I do want to get this question in. It's been very interesting to me, the silence, if you will, of white evangelicals, especially social conservatives.
Yeah.
And what I've said, I've called out Ralph Reed and Tony Perkins, and I said, wait a minute, you guys are always talking about pro-life. What about Trayvon Martin's life?
Right.
I just find it interesting when social justice issues happens, you rarely will see white evangelicals standing with African-American pastors. I think they simply say, you know what, this is really a black problem as opposed to a life problem.
Right.
I know the NAACP met with Franklin Graham recently, who's been saying some racist comments about President Obama.
In terms of questioning the president's faith, thing along those lines.
Exactly. And so they challenged him to speak out on Trayvon Martin, and he said that he would, and I hope that he does, because I think you make a very important point. I know a lot of white evangelicals that are very concerned about this issue and will in the coming days be speaking out on it. And so I'm heartened by that. But I think this is an issue for all people, regardless of political persuasion, regardless of faith, regardless of background.
It just troubles me again when you don't hear folks say anything. And I believe, and I had a good conversation with several of conservative commentators on CNN, and I told them, I said, here's what I think the problem is. I said, I think in this kind of case, many social conservatives are also pro-law enforcement, are also pro-Second Amendment.
Sure.
And so when this is, they're sort of like, I don't know where I come down. I said, if you believe in life, I just think as a person of faith, you can't just say, I'm going to be silent.
I do too. But at the same time, let's be fair to some of those social conservatives. You and I both know they do not get a fair shot in the general landscape of the media.
But when you don't say anything, then you would not have an opportunity to be called. All I'm simply saying is that when these sort of stories happen, when Sean Bell happens, when this story happens, when when other stories happens, I often don't see white evangelicals standing with black pastors. And all this reminds me of, it was MLK and the letters from a Birmingham jail when he challenged white pastors to get off the sidelines. And I think that's part of the issue. And so I do believe oftentimes folks will say, well, that's really a black problem versus we need to be in the game.
What about just speaking out because it is the right thing to do, because we know that there seems to be irregularities, we know that there are problems with this particular case, white or black, and we shouldn't try to separate the two out, because there is a big racial issue here, and we don't want to remove that or ignore that pink elephant in the room.
All I'm saying is, if you want to ask black pastors to stand with you when it comes to a pro-life rally, I'm saying stand when somebody like Trayvon Martin is killed.
I agree as well.
I certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right then, folks. I hope this conversation encourages everyone to get involved in fighting justice, not just for Trayvon Martin, but for young black men everywhere, but also young folks, period. To quote Dr. King, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I will be in Florida, Sanford, Florida, tomorrow covering a march at the Sanford City Hall to demand action on this case. I'll have a special report next Sunday here in Washington Watch.